I was accepted into Cornell, my dream school. Years of hard work had paid off, and my father had always promised to cover my education. But at our celebration dinner, he dropped a bomb. "I'm using your college fund for your cousin Jackson instead." My world shattered that night. Mom stayed silent as my future crumbled before my eyes. I never imagined my own father would betray me so deeply, but karma has a way of balancing the scales. Years later, he's drowning in regret, while I built my success from nothing. Before I continue my story, let me know where you're watching from, and hit subscribe if you've ever felt betrayed by someone you trusted. Growing up in Boston in a middle-class family, I had what most would consider a normal childhood. My dad worked as an engineer at a respectable firm, and my mom taught third grade at the local elementary school. We weren't wealthy, but we lived comfortably in a modest, three-bedroom house in a decent neighborhood. From an early age, my father instilled in me the importance of education. "Ezekiel," he would say, "ruffling my hair with your brains, you could go anywhere. Harvard, Yale, Cornell, any of them would be lucky to have you." I took his words to heart. While other kids played video games after school, I buried myself in books. Science fairs, debate tournaments, chess championships, I excelled at them all. By junior year, I had a 4 gigapascals, was president of the science club, and volunteered at the local hospital on weekends. Cornell became my dream. Their engineering program was renowned, and every time I mentioned it, my father would nod approvingly. "We've been saving since you were in diapers," he would assure me. "Your college fund is growing nicely. When the time comes, you'll go wherever you want." That promise kept me going through countless late nights studying and sacrificing social events. I believed him completely. Everything changed when cousin Jackson moved in with us during my sophomore year. His parents, my dad's sister and her husband, had a messy divorce, and somehow we became Jackson's safe haven. At 17, just a year older than me, Jackson arrived with a cloud of problems hovering over him. He had mediocre grades, had been caught drinking at school twice, and generally carried himself with an attitude that suggested the world owed him something. Initially, I tried to welcome him. I showed him around school, introduced him to my friends, and even helped him with homework. But Jackson had different plans. Within weeks, he had charmed my parents completely. He would help my mother with groceries, laugh at my father's terrible jokes, and share stories about his troubled home life that left my parents exchanging sympathetic glances. Slowly but surely, Jackson became the son my father always wanted. Athletic, outgoing, and good with his hands in ways I never was. "Your cousin has had it rough," my father would say whenever I complained about Jackson using my things without asking or coming home late and waking everyone up. "We need to cut him some slack." The tension in our house grew steadily. Jackson would make snide remarks when my parents weren't around, then transform into the perfect nephew the moment they entered the room. I noticed my father spending more time with Jackson, teaching him to change oil, taking him to baseball games, activities he had never shown interest in doing with me. There were warning signs I should have seen. The new laptop Jackson needed for school that suddenly appeared despite his mediocre grades. The sudden fishing trips my father organized for just the two of them. The way my mother would change the subject whenever I mentioned college visits. Senior year arrived, and with it, the long-awaited letter from Cornell. I still remember the weight of the envelope in my hands, the way my fingers trembled as I tore it open, and the rush of joy at seeing the word, "Congratulations." That night, my parents organized a small celebration dinner. My mother cooked my favorite meal, pot roast with roasted potatoes, and even baked a Cornell-themed cake with red and white frosting. The atmosphere was festive, with my father popping open a bottle of champagne for a toast. "To Ezekiel," he said, raising his glass. "Cornell won't know what hit them." I beamed with pride, already imagining myself walking across that beautiful campus. Then, as we were finishing dessert, my father cleared his throat. "There's something we need to discuss," he said, his voice suddenly serious. "About college." My mother immediately became interested in folding her napkin, avoiding my eyes. "What about it?" I asked, still riding the high of my acceptance. "Jackson has been accepted to Northwestern," my father announced. "It's a wonderful opportunity for him to turn his life around." I nodded, not understanding where this was going. "That's great for him. The thing is," my father continued, "Northwestern is expensive and Jackson's parents cannot help him." A cold feeling began creeping up my spine. After much consideration, my father said, not quite meeting my eyes. I've decided to use your college fund to support Jackson's education instead. The words hit me like a physical blow. I stared at him, waiting for the punchline of what had to be a cruel joke. You're joking, I said finally when no one spoke. Tell me you're joking. I'm sorry, Ezekiel, he replied. But Jackson needs this opportunity more than you do. You're smart enough to get scholarships. Jackson doesn't have that advantage. I looked to my mother for support, but she just stared at her plate, silent tears tracking down her cheeks. What about all your promises? I asked, my voice cracking. What about Cornell? You can still go, my father said, as if offering a generous compromise. Just not with our financial support. That night, after everyone had gone to bed, I cornered my father in his study. The confrontation revealed the full extent of the betrayal. Not only was he giving my college fund to Jackson, but he had already begun spending it on him. The laptop, the clothes, the trips, all from money that was supposed to secure my future. I don't understand, I said, fighting back tears. Why would you do this? You've always had everything come easily to you, my father replied. Good grades, awards, recognition. Jackson has struggled his whole life. This is his one chance to make something of himself. And what about my one chance? I countered. You'll find a way, he said with a dismissive wave. You always do. Later that night, my mother crept into my room and sat on the edge of my bed. I tried to talk him out of it, she whispered. But your father. He's determined to help Jackson. Why won't you stand up to him? I asked. She just shook her head, patted my hand, and left without another word. The weeks following my father's announcement were among the darkest of my life. I appealed to Cornell's financial aid office, but because my parents' income was too high, I didn't qualify for sufficient aid. Student loans would have covered only a portion, leaving me tens of thousands short each year. With a heavy heart, I was forced to decline my acceptance. Depression hit me hard. I would lie in bed, staring at the ceiling, wondering how my own father could betray me so completely. The sting was made worse by Jackson's reaction to his good fortune. Instead of showing gratitude, he strutted around with a smug smile, ordering expensive items online, and making casual references to his upcoming life at Northwestern. Must be tough, he said to me once when we were alone, knowing your dad thinks I deserve your future more than you do. I enrolled in the local community college while working full-time at a warehouse to save money. My plan was to complete basic courses, then transfer to a 4-year university if I could save enough. The contrast between my reality and what should have been my life at Cornell was painful to contemplate. Meanwhile, the divide between my father and me grew into a chasm. Our conversations became brief and functional. Pass the salt at dinner, the water bill is due in passing. The warm relationship we once shared withered into something cold and formal. Family gatherings became exercises in endurance. Relatives who knew about my Cornell acceptance would ask innocently, "How's college going?" forcing me to explain over and over that plans had changed. My father would quickly change the subject, launching into proud updates about Jackson's experiences at Northwestern. Those updates conveniently omitted the reality of how Jackson was spending my father's money. Through mutual friends and social media, I saw the truth. Photos of wild parties, expensive spring break trips, and a new car that certainly wasn't included in standard tuition costs. Jackson was treating college like an extended vacation funded by my stolen dreams. My parents remained willfully blind to his behavior. When I tried to show my father evidence of Jackson's partying, he accused me of jealousy. He's just enjoying the college experience, he defended. His grades are fine. They weren't fine. Another mutual friend in Jackson's study group confirmed he was barely passing his classes, often skipping them entirely. But my parents chose not to see it. While Jackson lived in luxury, I experienced the harsh reality of trying to support myself. My warehouse job required lifting heavy boxes for 8-hour shifts before rushing to evening classes. I would return to the small apartment I shared with 3 other guys, often too exhausted to do more than microwave a cheap meal before falling into bed. My health suffered. I lost weight, developed insomnia, and caught every cold that circulated. One particularly bad winter, I came down with pneumonia, but couldn't afford to miss work, so I pushed through with fever and chills, taking breaks to cough in the bathroom where my supervisor wouldn't see. The distance between my parents and me continued to grow. They didn't understand, or chose not to understand, my struggles. My mother would call occasionally, her voice tinged with guilt, offering small talk without acknowledging the elephant in the room. My father's calls became increasingly rare. Meanwhile, Jackson's Instagram showcased his lavish college life, fraternity formals, spring break in Cancun, a new MacBook Pro. Each post was a reminder of what should have been mine. I stopped checking social media entirely. The comparison was too painful. After 3 years of this arrangement, the situation reached a breaking point. Jackson had burned through an enormous amount of money, but was nowhere near graduating. In fact, as I later discovered, he had been on academic probation twice and had changed his major 3 times. The truth came to light at Thanksgiving dinner. I had reluctantly agreed to attend, mostly to see my grandmother, who was visiting from Florida. The tension at the table was thick enough to cut with a knife, with Jackson conspicuously absent despite promises he would join us. "Where's Jackson?" my grandmother asked innocently. "I thought he was coming home from Northwestern." My father shifted uncomfortably. "He had some project to finish. He'll be here for Christmas." I couldn't contain myself anymore. "Are you sure he's even still enrolled?" The table fell silent. "What are you talking about?" my father demanded. "Jackson dropped out 6 months ago," I said, the words bursting from me like water through a broken dam. "He's been living with friends in Chicago, pretending to attend classes while spending your money." My father's face turned an alarming shade of red. "That's a lie. We just paid his tuition last month." "Check the university records," I challenged. "Call his academic advisor. Better yet, ask him yourself." That night, my father made some calls and discovered I was right. Jackson had indeed dropped out and had been cashing tuition checks for personal use. What followed was the first honest conversation between my father and me in years, though honest doesn't mean pleasant. "How could you not know?" I asked, years of suppressed anger finally finding voice. "How could you throw away my future for someone who clearly didn't deserve it?" Instead of admitting his mistake, my father doubled down. "Jackson made some poor choices, but his intentions were good. He's just lost his way." "And what about me?" I shouted. "What about my way? The one you deliberately blocked?" "You were always going to be fine," he insisted. "Look at you. You're still in school, still working toward your goals." "No thanks to you," I responded bitterly. "I'm doing it despite you, not because of you." The argument escalated until I found myself standing in the driveway shaking with rage, while my father continued to defend his decisions. And Jackson. It was clear to me then that nothing would change. In my father's eyes, Jackson would always deserve more support, more chances, more love than his own son. The final blow came 3 months after that Thanksgiving confrontation. I had maintained minimal contact with my parents, still trying to process the anger and hurt. Then I received a call from my mother's best friend, Susan, who had always been like an aunt to me. "Ezekiel," she said, her voice urgent, "I think you need to know what's happening with your parents." From Susan, I learned the full extent of my father's betrayal. Not only had he given Jackson my entire college fund, nearly $80,000 saved over 18 years, but he had also taken out a second mortgage on their house to continue supporting him even after the fund was depleted. "Your father is in serious financial trouble," Susan explained. "The bank is threatening foreclosure, and they've maxed out their credit cards." The revelation stunned me. I had assumed my college fund was the extent of the sacrifice. The idea that my father had jeopardized my parents' home and financial security for Jackson was incomprehensible. Even more shocking was the discovery that Jackson had been selling items purchased with education money, electronics, textbooks, even the car, and pocketing the cash. He had effectively conned my father out of thousands more than I had initially realized. That weekend, I drove home, determined to have a final conversation with my parents. The house that had once been immaculately maintained now showed signs of neglect: peeling paint, overgrown lawn, a general air of defeat. My father looked older, the stress of financial ruin etched into the lines of his face. Still, when I confronted him about the second mortgage and credit card debt, his first instinct was to defend Jackson. "He made some mistakes," my father insisted, "but he's family." "And what am I?" I asked quietly. My father's response shattered whatever remaining illusion I had about our relationship. "You were always capable of making it on your own," he said. "I never had to worry about you." In that moment, I understood a painful truth: my self-sufficiency had been used against me. My father had taken my resilience for granted, assuming I could weather any storm while he focused his resources and affection on someone who constantly demonstrated he deserved neither. "I've always been proud of you," my father added, as if that should compensate for everything. "Pride doesn't pay tuition," I replied, "and it doesn't make up for betrayal." My mother, who had been quietly crying in the corner, finally spoke up. "I should have stopped him," she admitted. "I knew it was wrong, but I was too afraid to stand up to him. I failed you, Ezekiel." Her admission came too late to heal the wound, but did provide a small measure of validation. At least one of my parents recognized the injustice done to me. That night I packed whatever personal belongings remained in my old room. Yearbooks, childhood trophies, the telescope my grandfather had given me. Tangible pieces of a life that now felt like it belonged to someone else. "Where will you go?" my mother asked, as I loaded my car. "Away," I replied simply. "I need a fresh start." At 22, with nothing but a half-completed community college education, a few $1,000s saved from my warehouse job, and a broken heart, I drove to Philadelphia. I had no connections there, no safety net, just a determination to rebuild my life on my own terms, free from the shadow of my father's betrayal. The first months were hard. I rented a tiny room in a rundown apartment complex and took the first job I could find, working at a shipping company during the day and as a security guard at night. Sleep became a luxury I could rarely afford, but each dollar earned represented another step toward independence. Slowly, things began to improve. The shipping company recognized my work ethic and promoted me to a logistics coordinator position with slightly better pay. I enrolled in night classes at the local community college to continue my education. The turning point came when I met Anthony, a senior manager at the shipping company who took notice of my dedication. Over lunch one day, he asked about my background, and something in his kind eyes made me share my story. "That's a raw deal," he said when I finished. "But you know what impresses me? You're still here, still fighting." Anthony became more than a boss. He became a mentor. He gave me additional responsibilities, taught me about supply chain management, and eventually recommended me for a junior management position that came with tuition assistance benefits. With this new opportunity, I applied to the business program at Temple University. The day my acceptance letter arrived, I sat alone in my apartment and cried, not from sadness this time, but from a profound sense of vindication. I was rebuilding what had been taken from me one difficult step at a time. At Temple, I met Trevor, a computer science major with an entrepreneurial spirit. We bonded over late-night study sessions and a shared passion for innovation. Trevor had a brilliant idea for logistics software that could revolutionize inventory management for small businesses, and I had the practical experience to help refine it. "We could make something of this," Trevor suggested one night, as we sketched out the concept on napkins at a 24-hour diner. A real business. We spent every spare moment developing a prototype, testing it, refining it. Between classes, work, and our project, I barely slept 4 hours a night. But for the first time since the betrayal, I felt alive with purpose. Our breakthrough came during a university business competition. Our presentation caught the attention of a local angel investor who saw potential in both our software and our determination. "You two have fire," she said, offering us initial funding to develop the business properly. "And that's more valuable than any fancy degree." 5 years after leaving my parents' house, I stood in the lobby of our company's new office space in downtown Philadelphia. From that first investment, Trevor and I had built Logisync into a successful startup with 28 employees and clients across 3 states. We had just closed our Series A funding round, securing enough capital to expand nationally. The journey had been grueling, but rewarding. I had completed my business degree with honors, while working full-time and building the company. I had learned to function on minimal sleep, to negotiate with confidence, to pick myself up after setbacks, and most importantly, to trust my own judgment. With my first significant paycheck, I had bought a modest but comfortable condo in a nice neighborhood, purchased entirely with my own money without a penny of family help. The keys to that condo represented more than property ownership. They symbolized my reclaimed independence. I had not spoken to my parents in nearly 4 years. Occasional updates came through Susan, who remained in touch with my mother. From these brief reports, I learned that my father's financial situation had continued to deteriorate. The second mortgage he had taken out for Jackson had indeed resulted in foreclosure. My parents had been forced to sell their home at a loss and move into a small apartment. My father's health had suffered with stress, contributing to high blood pressure and a minor heart attack. Jackson predictably had disappeared once the money ran dry. Last Susan heard he was working odd jobs in California, having never completed his degree despite the enormous sacrifice my father had made on his behalf. The irony was not lost on me. The son my father had sacrificed everything for had abandoned him, while the son he had betrayed had built a successful life despite his actions. It was a bitter kind of vindication. Then, on an ordinary Tuesday, an email appeared in my inbox with a subject line that made my heart stop. "We need to talk. Mom." For several days I left it unopened, unsure if I was ready to reopen old wounds. Finally, curiosity won out. The message was brief, explaining that my father was in poor health and asking if I would consider meeting them. They were now living just outside Philadelphia, a coincidence that felt like the universe's strange sense of humor. After much deliberation, I agreed to meet them at a coffee shop, neutral territory where I could leave if things became too difficult. Walking into that cafe, I barely recognized the couple sitting in the corner booth. My father, once robust and confident now, looked frail and diminished. My mother had aged a decade in 5 years, worry lines permanently etched around her eyes. "Ezekiel," my father said, his voice breaking as I approached. "Thank you for coming." I sat down, maintaining an emotional distance despite their physical proximity. "What did you want to talk about?" My father looked down at his trembling hands. "I made a terrible mistake," he said simply. "The worst mistake of my life." The admission I had once desperately wanted now felt hollow, coming years too late. Still, I listened as he explained how everything had fallen apart after Jackson left, how the financial burden had crushed them, how retirement had become an impossible dream. "I betrayed you," my father continued, tears streaming down his weathered face. "I chose someone else over my own son, and I have regretted it every day since." My mother reached across the table, not quite touching me. "We saw the article about your company in the business journal," she said. "We're so proud of what you've accomplished." "No thanks to you," I replied, the words coming out harsher than intended. My father nodded, accepting the blow. "You're right. You did this despite us, not because of us. I just want you to know that I understand now what I threw away. Not just your love and respect, but the relationship with an amazing son." Part of me wanted to storm out to let them continue suffering the consequences of their choices. But looking at their broken expressions, I realized something important. Holding on to anger was only hurting me. They were already living with the results of their decisions. "I can't pretend the past didn't happen," I said finally. "And I can't be the son you remember. That person is gone." "We understand," my mother whispered. But I continued. "I can help you with some basic needs. I'll set up a monthly stipend to supplement your income, not because you deserve it, but because I don't want to be the kind of person who turns his back on family, even family that turned their back on me." Relief and shame battled on my father's face. "Thank you," he said. "But what we really want is a chance to know you again if you'll allow it." I couldn't promise that. Instead, I offered small steps, occasional emails, maybe dinner every few months. It wasn't forgiveness, not completely, but it was an acknowledgement that healing might be possible even if our relationship would never be what it once was. Over the following year, we rebuilt a fragile connection. I maintained firm boundaries, made my expectations clear, and never allowed myself to become financially or emotionally dependent on them again. Our relationship became something new, not the blind trust of childhood, but a cautious, measured interaction between adults with a complicated history. Through this process, I discovered something unexpected: true freedom. By facing my parents without bitterness consuming me, I released the last chains of resentment that had bound me to the past. My success was no longer defined in opposition to their betrayal, but stood on its own merits. Today, at 28, I can look back at the painful journey with surprising gratitude. My father's betrayal forced me to forge my own path, to discover reserves of strength I might never have known otherwise. The company continues to thrive, and I recently became engaged to Amanda, a brilliant architect who understands my history and supports my careful approach to family relationships. When Amanda and I discuss our future children, I make one promise above all others: I will never make them feel that they must earn my love or support. My children will know with absolute certainty that their father stands behind them, that their dreams matter, and that family loyalty isn't conditional. The lesson I carried from my father's betrayal wasn't that family cannot be trusted. Rather, it was that true family, whether blood-related or chosen, is built on respect, support, and unwavering commitment to each other's well-being. Sometimes the family we create matters more than the family we're born into. My father's regret came too late to save our original relationship, but it served as a powerful reminder of what happens when we sacrifice those who love us for those who merely use us. The greatest karma wasn't his financial ruin or health problems. It was missing the opportunity to be part of the life and success of his son. As for me, I found peace in the knowledge that my success is sweeter because I earned it myself, one difficult step at a time. The path was harder than it should have been, but it led me exactly where I needed to go. Has your family ever betrayed your trust? How did you handle it? Share your experience in the comments below. If this story resonated with you, please like and subscribe to support more content like this. Remember, sometimes the greatest success story is the one you write yourself despite the obstacles others place in your way. Thank you for listening, and may you find the strength to build your own path regardless of who tries to block it.